Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with one of my former players in the old Berkshire organization, Bill Hartranft, who is now a licensed professional counselor and sports consultant with Mind Matters Consulting, and we're going to have a conversation about the importance of mental health in youth sports and really in general, but specifically in youth sports. So Bill, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So why do you think it's important to focus on mental health in youth sports specifically?
I really just think it's a perfect venue. Kids are looking up to a lot of role models in sports, and coaches happen to be that. And there's a lot of parent involvement, and it's a great place for kids to feel comfortable and where they get to, escape their realities. And when kids are in a comfortable environment, it's a better place for them to talk about things that are difficult. And I just think it's a good place where they can also feed off teammates and get support from others. And also, I would say early intervention is the best prevention of further issues in life and adulthood issues. And so if we can tackle some of these issues by raising awareness for mental health in youth sports, then I'd say that's better than waiting until we're an adult and we don't know how to handle these things.
Yeah, definitely. So what made you want to get into this field in the first place?
So when I was in high school, long story short, I found a sports psychologist named Dr. Alan Goldberg, who he sounded really great. My dad had found him online and recommended we give it a try. And I was apprehensive at first, but wanted to see what it was about and see if I could take my mental game to the next level, because it was something I had never worked on. And he had just helped me with so many things, from dealing with difficult coaches to letting go of mistakes that I've made to even healing from some injuries and traumas that were blocking me mentally, that I just found a passion for it and really wanted to do what he was doing.
Yeah, that's cool. So you said at first there's a little bit of apprehension, and obviously, there's still a huge amount of stigma that surrounds mental health to begin with. I think we've made progress in that area, but I still think we have a long way to go. So for you personally, what did you have to do to kind of overcome that apprehension or, the stigma of, you kind of saying, hey, I need to address this?
Honestly, it was as simple as telling myself I needed to at least try. I wasn't sure what to expect. And so I felt like at that time, what did I have to lose? Even though it made me uncomfortable to think about talking about my mental game. I didn't know it then, but I know now that was just me being uncomfortable with something different. But really what got me through that was just telling myself to give it a try. And if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. Luckily I did give it a try, and it lasted quite a long time. And actually he's someone I'm still in contact with. And he helps me out with what I do now. But yeah, I'll also tell you one of the first things Dr. Goldberg said to me in one of our first sessions was, I'm not a shrink. I'm not here to get down to your deepest, darkest issues unless that's something we need to do. So he really kept it on the surface. I think he knew that the stigma is there with athletes, and that culture that we should be strong and not face our problems. We shouldn't have to do that. So he has a way about him that kind of helps bring you into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so important. And like I said, I think we've come a long way in, recognizing it. And, it's funny. You and I first met when you were probably 13, 14 years old in that neighborhood. And, your dad would, bring you into the baseball facility that I had a pro shop in to get private lessons. And, you were one of, probably 1,000 kids a week that would roll in there to work on their game. But yet, we put so much emphasis on, private lessons and getting, help tweaking the technical side of the game. But we kind of let the performance, the mental performance, the mental health side of it, get
it's like
ignored.
a game of chance.
Yeah. So, tell me how do we to move the dial on that to make parents and players understand that it's great to go get the hitting lesson a couple times a week, but maybe you need to just go and talk to somebody too.
Sure. This is where I would encourage people who run facilities like that to build relationships with mental health professionals, to have a referral source. Anytime that you're an organization, whether it's sports or some other extracurricular activity, if you're dealing with youth, it's a really good idea to have a referral source if any of those children that you're working with need help. You can't expect yourself to always know what to do. And especially if you come across a student athlete who you suspect might be in an abusive situation or is dealing with some type of trauma in their life. Most average people aren't equipped to deal with that or to help someone. And so it's really helpful to have connections. The other thing I would say is it comes down to coaches and parents educating themselves more about it, to be driven enough to get rid of that old mentality that we should just be able to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and handle things the way we're born. It just doesn't work that way. And sometimes things happen in life that we aren't taught how to wrap our minds around. And if those issues go unaddressed, it can cause really big problems in your life. But if you address them early, you can make great changes in your life, and you can really learn from these things that happen, even if they're not great things that happen. So I would say it really does come down to people running organizations and coaches and parents educating themselves and just making it a comfortable environment to talk about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's that old phrase that it takes a village, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's where, we've got to understand as parents, as coaches, where our limits are and when it's time for us to hand it over. And I think that's so important. So you kind of answered this question a little bit already. But for an athlete that's really struggling with their mental health, I mean, what is the best way for them to go about addressing it?
Well, my hope would be that athlete has a comfortable place to go to open up about it. The first thing you do is just talk about it. Tell someone that you're struggling with something. If you're having constant negative thoughts and it's plaguing every day that you live, tell someone that that's happening, and hopefully someone can direct you to a professional. If you're listening to this right now, go ask your parents to take you to a professional. Seek out a licensed counselor, a licensed social worker or psychologist, and just set up an appointment, be open and honest with them, and see how they can help you. These are things that you shouldn't have to deal with on your own, and there's plenty of great ways to help people deal with them. So opening up is the key. But on the flip side of that, like I said, hopefully that athlete has a comfortable place to do that.
Yeah, because it's not always the easiest thing to do, is to be able to show your vulnerability. Because like you said, we're kind of taught, hey, you're tough, you're knocked down, you're, get back up during the game, but it's so much deeper than that. And I think the more we recognize that, the better off we'll be. And I think one thing, if there's a silver lining through COVID, it's the fact that I think a lot of people did start to focus on mental health, not just in the youth sports world, but in general, because all of a sudden, these humans, these creatures that are, drawn to connection and, other people are now, told to stay in this little spot and social distance and all this sort of stuff. So, I think that's a silver lining, but I guess my concern is as we get back to normal, are we going to again fall back into the traits of pre-pandemic? So what are your feelings on that?
I'm afraid you are going to see some of that because we are so anxious to get back to normal, and everyone misses the way things used to be. Like you said, there's a silver lining here. We are focusing more on mental health because the isolation we've been through it's been bad for everyone, but it's been particularly bad for people who live alone and for children that aren't able to go to school. But yeah, it's if you think about it, it's only been a year of this. And if you've been on the earth for 40 years, that's only 1/40th of your life that you've dealt with this. It's going to be really easy to go back to old ways.
Right.
But I think it's possible for us to keep this in mind and not forget what happened and how important it is to be connected and take care of each other. This should be a good example of how we can change our behavior moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, obviously as a former coach, I would always kind of go out of my way to just make small talk with players at times and, kind of, not make it all about the game itself. But,
Sure.
for coaches that are out there listening, um, you know, how important is it for them to take mental health seriously? That if a player comes up and says, I'm just not feeling my greatest today, coach, a lot of times, you kind of let that brush off, but, what are those red flags for a coach to recognize and say, hey, we need to have a talk and I need to, get you a professional involved?
Well, there's really no black and white answer to that, but the first part of your question is incredibly important to me. I think a coach is a role model. You're signing up to be a role model. You're not just there to win ball games. You're there to. Any good coach you've ever met or seen has said they're not just there to win; they're there to create, good young men and women. That it's about creating character, and so that comes with learning how to accept defeat and how to work together as a team. And some red flags you can look for is when one of your players isn't able to do those things because they're stuck in their head all the time, or you notice that one of your players is distracted really often. They have a hard time staying in the present moment and focusing on the next play, or they're constantly beating themselves up after they miss a play, and they just can't seem to let go of those things. They might seem like not such big issues on the surface, but sometimes those things, if you ask enough questions, you can find out that some of those things are leading back to some deeper rooted issues. Like maybe you don't know what that kid's car ride is like on the way home. After he makes a mistake, maybe he's beating himself up so bad because he's trying to show everyone that he cares so that he doesn't get in trouble. Those types of things do happen, and I think that's where coaches play a huge role in supporting kids that are struggling with those kinds of things. But even something as simple as generalized depression, it can be very distracting, and young athletes, they don't necessarily know what's going on there. I know that I dealt with my own depression issues as a teenager and probably even younger than that, but I had no idea what was going on at the time. I just thought I was generally sad a little too often, and I didn't know what it actually was until I got older. And it's if you ask enough questions, you can really get to know a kid and what they are really dealing with, and it shows interest and it shows that you care, and that is a leader that an athlete's going to want to look up to anyway.
Yeah. And then, so obviously you've played for a plethora of coaches throughout your
Sure.
life. I'm sure some good ones and some bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, obviously without mentioning any names,
Yeah.
were there any coaches throughout your career who didn't help your mental game? And how much of a setback was that?
So I was actually very prepared to answer that. I don't know why, but I had thought about that question before we did this. And I think I do know why. It's because that's one of the reasons I got into what I'm doing now. I can think off the top of my head. I mean, like you said, hundreds of coaches that I've met, trainers, and there's probably only been, there's been less than a handful of those were negative experiences in my life. But at the same time, I'm at a point now where I look back on those times and I at moments thought I hated that person. But now I'm grateful that they were in my life because they brought me to where I'm at now, because I want to help kids deal with what I was dealing with. And so I think that they were actually catalysts in kind of pushing my career forward. and it taught me a lot about life. It made my skin thicker, not in the right way, but because I was able to learn how to deal with it later. But yeah, at those times, I can tell you one of them actually contributed. One of my experiences actually contributed to my own sports trauma, where my whole body shut down. I wasn't even able to throw a baseball.
Yeah.
Basic skill that you learn to do when you're 5 years old playing t-ball, and all of a sudden I couldn't even play catch anymore, and I'm almost a grown adult. So I wasn't really sure what was going on there, but through a lot of education and help from my own sports psychologist, I was able to figure those things out, and all these things just add up and brought me to where I'm at now. So although they were negative experiences, they were, I don't know, helpful.
Yeah, that's cool. I had the fortunate opportunity to spend some time with Leo Mazzoni a few years back. We had him to come in. We doubled up with Hot Stovers when they had him come in and speak, where we brought him in a day early and had him do a clinic with us at Body Zone. And I remember him telling me that, throughout his, at that point, 50 plus years of professional baseball, he says, I've met hundreds of coaches who, taught me how to do things the right way. And I met, a half dozen or so who taught me how to really not do things the right way. And I've learned as much from them as to how
Yeah.
not to treat other people as I did from the ones who taught me to do it the right way. So I think when you're able to kind of put that spin on it, that, this, when you're in the moment, it's, let's face it, it's pure hell, right? But when you can go back and reflect and say, you know what, I'm actually grateful that I went through that, because it's made me, the man I am today. So I think that's awesome. You can do that.
Sure.
So on the flip side, an experience with a coach that, you feel has really a positive experience that has really propelled you, to want to go out and make a difference in, the lives of the people you're talking to today.
Can I mention names on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
My junior college coach, Wayne Smith, was just probably one of the most influential coaches I ever had. I mean, you've met him.
Yep.
He's a wonderful guy. The way I describe him to people is that I can't remember a time he ever yelled at me or any of us, other than one time when I intentionally hit somebody. But he had every right to scold me for that. But without having to yell, we were so afraid to disappoint him. He just had our absolute respect at all times. And I remember living in my college apartment with my teammates, and even when we had parties and stuff and we're acting rowdy, we still always talked about not disappointing him and not doing the wrong things. And, if anybody was getting out of line, we say, come on, man, like, we don't want to disappoint coach. This is not why we're here. And that, I think his ability to do that and gain that respect by just being encouraging and kind, but professional, and fun and relatable. He didn't have to be hard to do that. And he got a lot out of us. He got us to play together as a team. It was some of the most fun I ever had. So I really respect that and always appreciate him for that.
Yeah. I hope there's some coaches out there listening who, if they don't have that approach, that they start to take that. I think it might have been Bobby Bowden who talked about, his approach to coaching is out of love, that everything he does for those players is based out of love. And when you make them understand that, you're going to get that extra mile,
Absolutely.
and, you don't, look, there are times where maybe you got to raise your voice or something like that. But I think if you have that demeanor of being pretty level headed, those times where you do have to take it to a next level are just that much more impactful to your players. And there is that sense of, wow, man, I really just let this guy down. So it's cool. And yeah, I've been fortunate enough to meet Wayne a couple times through Dell, and I know Dell has had nothing but positive things to say about him. So it's awesome that at the college level he can do that, and still, all these years later, you still recognize him as a guy that's had a huge amount of influence on you.
Yeah, and I can tell you it's not just me. I mean, when I'm texting with my old roommates, or we get together every once in a while, or we have the alumni games. I mean, Coach Smith isn't even coaching there anymore, but one of his former players now is, and we still talk about him. We still look forward to seeing him, when we get a chance to go to the alumni game, or so he's made lifelong impressions on all of us.
Yeah, that's important. So, we talked a little bit about, as we kind of go back to normal here, we talked a little bit about the stigma of mental health, and I'd like to kind of revisit that again because, I think for a male athlete, that's probably even a little bit more to overcome than for a female athlete. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and that's another stigma in itself. That these social norms that women are expected to be more emotional and more in touch with their feelings. That's realistically not true. It should be. It should go both ways. But female athletes have their own stigmas and issues in their own sports where they're being held back and being compared to men's sports all the time and things like that. But yeah, it is really difficult for male athletes because there's still a lot of this old school mentality that, you don't ever show your emotions. And that's totally true on the field. It's just like when you're at work, there's an appropriate time to be showing your emotions and not, but you don't just bottle them up and then never talk about them and never let them come out. You never face them, because I can promise you that is exactly how depression and anxiety get created, just by avoidance. When you avoid the way you think and feel, and you can't accept the way you think and feel, you're probably going to get sick. So it's super tough for boys. They're expected to have that thick skin looks like not almost like you don't care. And that shouldn't be the case, because boys and girls have deep-rooted emotions, and they're allowed to feel them. And
Yeah.
sometimes we take away their ability to be allowed to feel them.
Yeah, and it's like shaking up a bottle of soda. If you don't take that cap off, sooner or later it's going to come off on its own, and it's going to be messy at that point.
Exactly.
So, I guess really the way to overcome the stigma, you know, regardless of gender, is again these conversations, for
Yeah.
people to talk about it, for people to start to normalize it, for young kids to hear that it's okay to not be okay. You
Yeah.
know,
So change is slow, and progress is not linear. So, like you said, right now, you and I having this conversation, I feel like we're contributing as we speak. If anyone who's listening to this, as long as they keep an open mind, and they're willing to accept things we talk about and give it some thought, that's contributing to change. If they can pass along something they learned from this to someone else, or to another coach or athlete, that's contributing to change. So although it takes time, like you said earlier, we have come a really long way with mental health, especially in the last 20 years. But we still have a long way to go.
yeah, no doubt about that. And I think just one of the things that is so important for parents and coaches to work together on this. Because again, it takes a village. We read so much today about parents and coaches clashing, the playing time. So how
Yeah.
do we get over that and get it back to, look, we're in this together. It's not about me as the coach, you as the parent, vice versa. It's about our athlete, our son or daughter that's out there playing. How do we all say it's about the kids, but truly our actions don't always say that. So how do we really get to that point.
Sure. I mean, that starts at the beginning of the season. You make an agreement that you're the parent and you're the coach, and those are your roles. And if your son or daughter, it turns out to be a role player on the team, well, they have to play their role. You have to play your role too. A lot of these conflicts come from fear of letting go of control. My son or daughter doesn't seem to be getting the playing time they deserve. They seem disappointed. I have to do something to try to control that. When really, you're just teaching your son or daughter that, you can get what you want by arguing about it rather than working hard for it. The effort needs to come out in practice to earn more playing time. And don't get me wrong, certainly there are coaches that have biases and hold things against players, and you may not be getting the playing time you deserve, but it's not the only team you're ever going to play on. And you just keep working hard and wait for your opportunities. Parents should definitely just enjoy their kids playing the game. That's what they're there for, is just be mindful, be in that moment rather than getting wrapped up in your own thoughts and feelings and emotions. Just enjoy while you're there. Be grateful for the opportunity for your son or daughter to play a game when there's some kids that can't, or kids with disabilities that can't, or other things that stop kids from being able to play sports.
Yeah, I think that's so important, is just, like you said, understanding your role, being grateful to, the fact that your kid can play, I think is really important.
I will also say, if parents and coaches are taking care of their own mental health, they're already helping take care of the kid's mental health. So if I'm really, really struggling with my son or daughter not getting enough playing time, and I find that I'm boiling inside, that's probably not a healthy response. And the feelings are okay that that's happening. But if you can't handle that urge to react to it, and you can't just let it go, well, there's things there for you to work on. And you can be an example. And I promise you that children learn through modeling more than they learn through books, or through being taught. They watch adults deal with conflict. And every time you're in a conflict, you got to ask yourself, how would I want my son or daughter to handle this if they were in this situation when they're an adult? Because they're watching you.
Yeah. The do as I say, not as I do mentality is a method of failure.
Absolutely. It's guaranteed to fail.
So, talking about failure, obviously failure is part of every sport. I mean, your primary sport, I think, was baseball. You
Yep.
obviously played some basketball throughout your career as well, but, the game of baseball is all about failure. And again, it's something that we talk about a lot, but we don't always practice it, and understanding the importance of letting those kids fail.
Yeah.
And how important it is to carry that same attitude on to life. So, speak a little to that.
One of the best questions you can always ask yourself when you make a mistake or fail at something is, what can I learn from it? How can this be good for me? How can I make this an opportunity? So one of the keys to peak performance and mental health in general is being mindful, staying in the present moment. And in order to be mindful, you have to treat the moment like an opportunity, not an obstacle. And so even a mistake or a failure, you could even change the way you look at it. It doesn't even have to be a failure if you just turn it into opportunity. And that's a big thing that I teach. And parents can play and coaches can play a huge role in helping athletes learn that skill, that failure is okay. It means you're playing the game. You should be failing. If you're not failing, you're probably not even trying. Or you're not doing things that challenge you.
Yeah. Yeah. The team that goes, 32-0, and wins the bulk of their games by 10 runs or something like that isn't necessarily a true life experience. Let's put it that way.
No, that can be fun for a little while, but you're not going to learn a lot from it.
Right. Right. I mean,
although I was on a 32-0 team once, remember?
And actually, I wasn't even thinking of that when I brought that number up, 32-0. But yes, you were, which was quite.
We learned a lot there through relationships and experience, and then we learned a big life lesson when we ended 30. What was it, 32 or 34-2?
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. So, let's talk just a little bit about, how. I mean, you mentioned about some of your college teammates and the effect that Wayne had on them, but just in general, the benefits of sports. I mean, how it, the effect it had on you. I mean, I know there's guys that you played with that you're still great friends with today. I mean, how important is that in the development of a young person?
I can mostly speak personally that it was. I don't know where my life would be if I didn't play sports the way I did. I'm grateful that my parents, they never tortured me with it. They only pushed me because I wanted it, and they saw that I wanted it, and so they encouraged me, and they would point out if they saw I wasn't trying my best because they knew I would regret that. But I was grateful to have parents that encouraged me to go to different practices and go from baseball to basketball and back and forth to lesson in camps. And all of that stuff taught me how to work well with others, taught me how to make friends and be social. Probably most importantly, it taught me how to do difficult things. That sports is where I learned how to push myself to the limit. And that is something that has really transferred into my adult life in the work world, with my health and my own fitness and just trying to stay in shape. Now I'm a dad, and it's taught me things about how I want to raise my child. So many life lessons. Like baseball in general for me was a microcosm of life, but sports in general are that. It's very much like real life. It's just a place where you get to kind of escape to live a different version of real life, but it can still teach you so many things. I think it's very important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So we're just about out of time here, but anything that we didn't cover that you feel is important for listeners to understand on this topic of mental health?
No, I think we covered a lot of the important stuff. I would just say I would encourage people to be more open-minded, open to mental health issues. I'll throw a statistic out there just to normalize things a little bit. 1 in 7 people, the last time I checked the research, 1 in 7 people this year will have some type of anxiety disorder issue at some point, just this year in the United States. And that number actually was pre-COVID, so I'm sure it's increased. And then in a lifetime in the United States, 1 out of every 100 people will struggle with some type of severe depression. If you think about how many people live here, that's really normal.
Yeah.
That means it's not a strange thing. It's not an excuse. It's not, oh, they just don't know how to handle their problems. It's a real thing that can happen, and all kinds of things can cause it. It doesn't have to be anybody's fault. Just be open-minded and look out for warning signs. If you're ever curious or concerned and you don't know what to do for your child or your athlete, contact their school counselor or reach out to an outpatient therapist and get connected, or even contact your insurance company and ask them for local therapists that they cover, and then you can start there. But just be open-minded.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. So, as I told you before we started recording, I always ask my guests a final question. The subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People, Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song called Gloria, which goes, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. What do you think one of those little things that you've done throughout your life to make a better place, to make the world a better place has been?
I want to keep it simple. Be kind. It's something that I learned at a very young age, and at some points in my life I thought it was a weakness, but really I just think that it's one of the most helpful things we can do, and I think I'm pretty good at it. I'm not afraid to compliment myself on that. So kindness goes a long way.
It sure does. It sure does. So anybody that's out there listening that does recognize that they need some help, how would they get a hold of you, your company, if you want to
Sure.
give us some contact points there, it's how they can reach out to you.
So if you're around the Reading area, you can reach out to me at mymindmatterscounseling.com would be our website. And then our phone number would be 844-MY-MIND-1. And that would take you directly to our support staff who has access to my schedule and other counselors' schedules. I'm the only sports consultant in my practice, but we have a lot of really great therapists with a lot of great experience that work with people of all ages. We'd be glad to help you out. Also, my email address I could give you is bill at mymindmatterscounseling.com. I know it's a mouthful.
That's all right. I'll put all that up on the screen for the video portion. But for those that are just listening on Spotify and the audio version, you may have to rewind a little bit to get it back, but that's fine too. So, Billy, I really appreciate the conversation. Appreciate you taking the time. I think it's something that, we need to continue to talk about. And, like I said, hopefully this is something that just moves the dial a little bit to make it more recognizable for people. And, like I said, make people really understand that, we all go through it. And it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to have those issues. And, we all need help sometime, without a doubt. So,
and it's not just okay, it's important that you do.
Yeah, very important. Yeah, I mean, because again, we talked about it before. The mind is so important, but it's all connected. Mind, body, and soul is all connected. So you can't just focus on one part. It's like if you're driving down the car and you're only concerned about 3 of your 4 tires having all the air in them.
Sure.
That 4th tire is going to stop everything.
Yeah, and it could cause a tragedy.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, again, I really appreciate it, Bill. I'm super proud of what you've done. Being a Berkshire alumni, I always want to make sure I pass that on to you guys when I connect with you again and see you out there, doing your thing. It makes us very proud.
Thank you.
For you and so many guys that came through the organization who are, creating that ripple effect and, being one of those many little people in many little places doing those things to make it better. So, folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other blogs and podcasts at danclouser.com. Billy, once again, really appreciate you taking the time out and talking to me today.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I had a great time.
You bet.